Well, when I was a little boy sitting on my mama.
Hello, my name is Marcie Sclove. Welcome to Going Deeper. Today my guest is Judy Brooks, and we are going to have a two-part interview. Judy was born in Cabin John, Maryland in 1944. She grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, and then she and her husband Barry moved to Amherst in 1971. They were co-directors of the ABC House, and we'll hear more about that later. And then Judy was hired to be an elementary school teacher at Pelham Elementary in 1974. And she worked in the Pelham Elementary School for 31 years. So that's a long time to be part of the school system, and we're going to hear about that. Judy also served on the select board for 2 terms in the late 80s and early 90s, and she's been on the Housing Authority for the last 23 years. So, welcome to the show, Judy.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming. I'm going to structure this interview a little bit differently. Instead of starting with your early life, I would like to delve right into your rich, historic, institutional memory of the Amherst school system. And I really would love to pick your brain about the past and what your experience was, partly because, as you know, we're having once again, some racial issues in the public schools. Right. It's bubbling up in a pretty serious way. And it's not the first time.
Nope.
We've seen this happening in our town. But it feels to me that if we can broaden the lens a little bit and look at this situation more from the historic sense of it, not just what's happening right now, we may learn something.
Right. And it's always good to have history.
And it's always good to have history. So I wanted to go back to those years. In 1974, you were hired, Pelham Elementary.
Pelham. Yeah.
Pelham. And I just would love to ask you to start there. What was that like coming in, being the only African-American teacher?
In the town. In the town at that time.
Okay.
Yeah. It was different, not that it was frightening. Only thing was frightening was, oh God, I'm teaching 5th graders. I hadn't taught 5th graders before.
Yeah.
I had taught 2nd and 3rd graders. So the part of being black never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I was going in to teach, to be a teacher. And as time went on, bless her heart, Mrs. Partridge helped me to remember that I was black. Because she was, I don't know, kept asking me, was everything all right? Did I feel comfortable? And I said, sure.
Now, was she the principal?
She was the principal.
Okay.
And also she lived, everybody at that time all lived in the communities, and I guess she was prominent in Pelham at the time. And she had taught the kids that I was teaching mostly, their parents. So she was like the principal of Pelham Elementary School. And her concerns were for me and how was I feeling. And so I quickly put that to rest and told her, I think you better inquire with the parents, because this is going to be their first time dealing with a black teacher.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if she had thought about that part, but neither had I, because coming from Washington, D.C., and I was already teaching in an integrated situation in Bladensburg Elementary School, which was a larger school system. It was I was in a school within a school, had 4 schools, and I was the only black 2nd grade teacher within my school. And at that time, they had one of us, African American blacks, in each of the schools, even including our librarian was a black woman. So we had like our little black caucus or group that we could meet and discuss, to bond, because we were separated during the day. Most of the time, the only time we had was either before or maybe during lunch. So coming to Pelham, wasn't a big deal being around all white people, you know?
Did you have, well, a couple questions. Did you have support in that sense of other blacks in the community who...
But in Pelham or in...
Well, you were living in Amherst, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, in Amherst, I had support because I was in ABC house, so we had that support.
Yeah.
And leaving Amherst to go to Pelham, I don't think there were any other black people living in Pelham because everybody was coming down to Amherst to work.
Yeah.
They either worked... you had a class system in Pelham. So you had the parents who were the cafeteria, you know, both Amherst College and University.
Yeah.
And so that echelon, and then that reflected in my classroom. So you had this and that.
Right.
So I didn't have to worry about racial integration. I had to worry about social integration of classism.
Yeah, yeah.
So that put a whole different focus into what I was, you know, dealing with.
Yeah.
Which also helped me to grow as a person to understand, it just ain't black white, okay?
Right.
So as it went on, I never felt any ramifications of being there. Just, you know, I had to eased our way into the school system, and with open house and getting to know the parents, and so it was a slow process, but in the long run, it came out good.
Sure.
So then...
Tell us about Donald Frizzle and
the superintendent. Well, I first learned about Pelham when I used to go to being in the ABC house. I would attend school committee meetings, and he always talked about how he enjoyed going to Pelham for the school committee meetings because it was so nice and calm and peaceful. Okay, that's when I first heard about it. When I went in for my interview in 1974, back then, they had all the principals come to hear the one candidate, and all the candidates were there, but never did Mrs. Partridge. She don't stand out or made herself known. So when I got the call back and said I had 2 offers, one in Fort River and one at Pelham, and I could go and visit. So I went to both schools and was waiting. Mrs. Partridge was the first to pull, and Don Frizzle called me in and says, you have to go to Pelham. She wants you in Pelham. So I said, okay, because I had interviewed at Fort River, and it was a larger school situation and larger class. I said, I've been this before, so let's try something new. So I went to Pelham, and it was small, and they didn't even have kindergarten. It was 1 through 6, and I was going to be the 5th grade teacher. The 6th grade teacher was Peter Javickas. So he helped me through and taught me how to do, but the thing really was amazing to me was your curriculum. Because coming out of a larger school system, you knew what you had to do, whatever you want to do. So I said, okay, what does that mean? What subjects do I, besides reading and math? Oh, well, we have social studies and da-da-da. So I kind of like interdisciplinary my curriculum to approaching the goals of their school, So it was a normal curriculum, and as time went by and things became, I looked around and there wasn't any celebrations of any kind or any mentions of Black history or whatever. So I introduced to Mrs. Partridge the celebration of Martin Luther King and got the school involved. And that time, at the same time, Mary White and I were working on the breakfast, Martin Luther King breakfast that started at the junior high school. So I was like the school contact from the Martin Luther King committee to see that the schools were participating. So then I thought about how could we get every school participating, and that thought came out with the placemats. Every child could make a placemat as they're learning about Martin Luther King and design their placemats that we would use for the morning breakfast. So that's how that came. And then each school, I don't know what each school did, but Pelham, I started celebrating Martin Luther King at the 5th grade level because that was the older group, and we watched the films and the videos, and we did the history. And then at the end of a culminating activity to show what they had learned, we had a program where we would invite the community in and
Nice.
That was the beginning of.
Now, that's all happening in the classroom and with the breakfast and everything.
Right.
But I want to sort of steer the conversation a little more in terms of the whole school system.
Okay.
And Donald Frizzle was setting up other initiatives,
well, that
right?
came later. As I became more involved with the Teachers Association and getting in committees, I worked with a committee of teachers and parents called the Cultural Diversity Committee. And Donald Frizzle was the superintendent at that time.
And what years was that,
This
roughly?
was maybe 78 on.
Okay.
Because we wanted to bring in, because of the experiences that I had with the school system, with the ABC guys and the other few black parents that were here dealing with the racism of not allowing students to participate or the guys to play basketball in there. And so we eventually got my ABC guys on the basketball team, and the green guys played the first black hockey players. So from the Cultural Diversity Committee, we started looking at our school system and said it has to be more diversified. I don't know if anyone remembers, but there used to be a Confederate flag painted on the walls of the high school.
Oh, wow.
So that was our first encounter with the committee, and at that time, Don Frizzle was the superintendent, and we wanted it down off the wall.
Yeah.
So that began the rumbling of, and then every June, they had to go in with the soap and the water and the scrub brushes to erase and go home with all those kind of things at graduation times. So
that was going on in the high school.
High school.
Back in the late 70s.
Mid-70s, from, I would say, 78 on. And
using the N-word, go home.
Oh, yeah. And then there was, even in the 80s, I remember with my son coming home, talking about the South will rise again. They started a group, 80s, at the high school, of kids, white kids, starting the whole thing, and the Confederate flag thing came back. So it went from doing that. So the Cultural Diversity Committee is observing all this because we had parents and teachers.
Okay.
What can we do to bring the community and the schools together? So from that point on, working with Don Frizzle, we started developing the multicultural idea of thought coming into diversity. And we started out looking at curriculum. So we would have our curriculum days, got that. Then we looked at affirmative action. We brought in Rance Quinn from the State Department of Education, who helped us to formulate our affirmative action goals to put into place.
Right.
Then we hired or set up the job description for Jackie Beers, the culturally diverse person.
To do recruitment.
Right. And then as the school year went on, we then asked the administration, Dodd Frizzle, Ron Bell, Bob Murphy, Jack Heffley, that they, and we tied in with Bob Suzuki and other professors, Sonia Nieto, who were in the UMass Education Department dealing with multicultural education. So then we became a collaborative around the issue, racism, but at that time it was more culturally diversity. And from there, working with the administration, getting them on our page of understanding what we were talking about, blending, and back then we didn't have the diverse racial group. It was more just black, white, with some Asians. We had Bob Suzuki and a few other, because we had the connection with the Japanese.
Sister City. So
that went on, and it was going good, and we started integrating on our curriculum days. With Frizzle, meeting with him, we would get permission, or he would encourage us to set up our curriculum, show you how to integrate those goals into your curriculum.
So putting all of the multicultural education into each curriculum.
Yes. And we started out with social studies first, and then spread out. And then through the years, there was a teacher by the name of Sonia Wexler. who was a high school English teacher, and she had written a folk tales book of multicultural stories.
Yeah.
So, we then went back to the committee and said, let's start giving out her book to teachers who are reflecting our goals and understanding what multicultural education is.
Okay.
So that process started.
And then it sounds like you guys were really on a good roll.
Yeah.
And then Gus Sayer came in.
Yeah.
That was in, I don't know, late 80-something.
Yeah. Late 80s.
Late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah.
Okay. So what happened when Gus
Well, when Gus came in, we, said we already had this committee called Cultural Diversity Committee, and Anna Watt was one of our parents who worked with us. We had other parents. We would go up to Vermont because Vermont had a multicultural type of program that they were running.
Yeah.
And we would go up and get books to bring down to have book fairs at Wildwood Elementary School to show how diversity can be in children's books as well. Okay, so when Gus Sayer came in, we went and met with him, kicked us to the curb because he didn't know us and da-da-da-da-da. And we invited him to our meetings, so we kept meeting. And Jackie Beers was still on board and kept trying because we had the central connection. Didn't want to come to our meetings, and so we said, okay, what else are we going to do? He came up with the thought of BAMS kind of thing.
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about
becoming a
BAMS.
multicultural
School system.
At the same time, we were having issues, and I was a selectman at the select board. So in '92 now, the town of Amherst decided that they wanted to incorporate more of the BAMS type of philosophy because we, as a group of parents, noticed that there weren't any of our students being hired to work in the local stores at that time.
Oh.
So we had no reflection. Our income was coming in there, but we didn't see reflection, even down to Stop and Shop.
Okay.
Couldn't mess with Stop and Shop because it was in Hadley. But we had Louise and a few other stores, and Archie Kent, and where CVS now is another type of drugstore.
Yeah.
And other restaurants. So, so the issues that they're dealing with today are the same issues multiplied by more of a higher, intense racial group. And because there were Band-Aids or Bandages put on what we did just to keep them happy and quiet, all came off.
Okay.
And then as administration changed, somehow the thought of BAMS or cultural diversity, multicultural, kept getting pushed. The new teachers who came in didn't have committees the way we had committees.
And what about the recruitment?
What about it?
How was that going?
Well, I did. Jackie Beers and I recruited. And I had friends who were at Howard University, NCCU, who worked in the career planning offices, and they helped me set up. And I even went back to my alum, Bowie State, which is a black college, geared in education, to set up recruitment. Unsuccessfully, because we were in competition with larger school systems that could offer you a $10,000 bonus just for signing. Okay? So Jackie Beers and I brought all of this back and met with the administration and said, look, if you want us to, then this is what you're going to have to do. Give us more than a 3-fold brochure.
Right.
Or something, give us some incentives that we can say, if you come, we can give you this, we can give you this.
Right.
Nothing. We tried working on the Cultural Diversity Committee on landlords, apartments, cleaning stores, some kind of gift certificates, nothing. So if my philosophy then, looking around Amherst, and said, why would I want to bring a young black person into a community that had no support?
Yeah.
So it was really hard for me to go out and say, come.
Sure.
But I didn't have any incentives. So later on, we got back and said, well, in order for us to do this, then what can we as a system to say to a student or hiree, what incentives do we have? So working with the university again, we started giving out tuition waivers for you to go back for masters and finish off and things like that.
So that the teachers could come with a bachelor's degree.
Right.
And then they
whatever
could finish.
the certification and requirements for evaluation. Then within so many years, like 3 years before you became tenured, you had to show that you were meeting those goals.
And you could get that education for free at UMass through this incentive program.
Yes, and as that went on.
And now, is that under Frizzle or under Sayre?
Frizzle, and part of Sayre.
And part of Sayre.
And as they got their degrees, they went, which was, you know.
Right. They didn't stick around.
They didn't stick around like I was a permanent, which was different because I was married with a family and had kids. These were younger people who were coming in, getting their advancements and moving on to what they were, which you don't blame them.
Sure.
But trying
Well, you don't blame them, especially if there isn't a vibrant black community
when there's no support here.
Yeah.
And there was nothing for them socially, you know, other than coming to my house for dinner and playing with my kids or something like that. But for a young black person coming into, and then especially if you didn't have any ties to the university other than taking graduate courses in the evening and coming home. So it was kind of hard.
Yeah.
And for an active black person coming out, a student coming out of an active city looking for where the parties, it's like, excuse me, you know, there are no students.
Now, we don't have so much time, so I want to get back to this question about BAMS because I was involved in that a little bit. And the school committee back then voted it in, correct?
Right.
And it has like
a total unity.
It's a strategic plan.
Right, to get everybody involved on the same page.
Yeah.
With things that people could follow and see. Even the town. We had the town manager, because at that time, the select board was looking at and created the Human Rights Commission. Because of the issues that we were dealing with, racism and hiring practices with the fire department, public works, and the police department. Fire department and the police department jumped right on board, and you see there's been an increase. If DPW has hired anyone, there was only one black person, and at the time the manager of DPW said whichever one would cut the mustard would get the job. So we had one that was able to cut the mustard. And I don't know who's down there now.
But in the schools, is there anything in that BAMS plan from then? I know it was kind of like a watered down thing by the time it got, you know, finished.
Focused,
But nonetheless, it was voted in by the school committee. Is there anything in that plan that could be applied to the issues now?
Sure. Respect and social justice, the whole thing.
It's all in there.
I mean, if you look at it, it's no more than...
And it doesn't need to be ratified again.
Well, it may have to be ratified, changed for the newness of social justice and the issues that they're dealing with now. But the racial things are still there, respecting one another, and even to the fact that I think when Gus Sayre was the superintendent, we had to have a goal within our evaluation for the year. How are we going to meet our BAMS goals? So the principals were aware. So that's why we said it was a total.
Right.
And even school committee knew. And town, you know.
So at this point, given that we are in deep doo-doo.
Right.
And even it's not even funny. I'm not trying to make light of it. Even if we go back
to BAMS, look at that. Both schools, since we now have the connection back again with the town and the school.
Right.
If they bring back BAMS, just to review it.
Just to review it and go from there.
Everybody would be on the same page.
And then maybe it could be more...
community involvement, because everybody would be on the same page. Everybody
so that's
would
a recommendation.
know. And that's what I would say, mine too. I would say we start with BAMS, but bring it into the 21st century.
Exactly.
Start
it as a starting place.
It's a foundation, and we all need a strong foundation.
Well, especially it seems like there's a lot of polarizing going on right now. So if there's a foundation that we can move forward.
And my foundation is having respect for one another. We can all disagree, but we can all respect and understanding our disagreements. but keep it at a level that we can all also make some improvements and some advancements and move ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. That, you know, we live in a town that
Very diversified.
very diverse, but there is a sort of undercurrent of like progressiveness and caring about the spiritual or the, you know, faith-based sense of how to be with people.
And that's all culturally based.
And that, yeah.
And that may come from the cultures that are intertwining. As I said, back then, it was black, white.
Yeah.
And it wasn't any of that. We were just dealing with the real racial discrimination issues that were right in front of your face every day. Here, the same issues, but as I was saying before, the teachers that are coming in now, I don't know if they have any history background or are informed or whatever, or asked to or be aware of, or this is what we do. Information.
Yeah.
It seems like it's all scattered across the board. So if we can all come together again, as this issue, it's not the first, probably another 40 years, and this one has been a 40-year issue. That'll be another 40 years. But as we move on, new things come in.
Right.
And that's why I said we look at it in a different focus, but respect all the other issues that have ramifications.
Yeah. Judy, we're going to stop part one now. Thank you for this.
Oh, yes.
This is exactly what I was hoping
Oh,
for.
good.
To really see more
Good.
of the broad perspective.
Right. And it is broad.
Yeah. So thank you all for joining us, and we will continue this in part two. Take care.